Welcome back to Dealing in Absolutes. I'm your host, Danny, and with me, as always, is Brian. We are halfway through Andor Season 2. Right now, we've got Bix arguing with Andor. We've got Andor arguing with Luthen. You've got Luthen arguing with Kleya. You've got Kleya arguing with Lionel Richie? And we've got about 1,000 podcasters arguing with each other as to why they should or shouldn't stay watching Andor. So, Brian, is your Fandor-ness fading? Are you still on board with Andor?
I'm still on board. I'm not arguing with anyone on Andor. I'm arguing with my car dealership, which is why we've had to take a few stabs into this episode. No, I'm still on board. So here's my overall thinking. You cannot compare this show to other Star Wars shows, right? This is Star Wars. This is Disney Star Wars trying for prestige television, which means that the structure and the pacing of a show like this is going to be more similar to what you see on like Sopranos or Mad Men or The Wire or things like that, where things are going to be a little bit slower, right? They're going to be a little bit slower. They're not going to hold your hand on things, right? You're going to be confused. You're going to be misdirected at times. Characters are going to lie. And there are going to be moments that you're going to have to just kind of infer, where no one's going to come out and say XYZ, right? Similar to, I feel like I can spoil the ending of The Sopranos. It's been what, like 15 years or so, or something like that.
I still haven't seen it, so there's a few episodes, right? If I start tomorrow, I can just get back to you next episode and be like, hey.
So the ending is famous enough that I feel like I can, the ending is famous where it just cuts the black, and there's no definitive answer to like why the series just like, and they're in a diner and they cut the black. But like there's an answer that gets you like 75 to 80% of the way there of what does that meaning really mean. No one holds your hand, but if you go back and you watch the series, there's clues throughout that like, okay, the show could not have ended any other way. That's what a lot of the stuff happening in Andor is. And I feel like we are going to be rewarded, right? I trust, in Gilroy, we trust here. Like he has shown that, patience is going to be rewarded. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is all building up to nothing in particular. I just don't feel that way. It's the difference between like, it's like having a nice steak versus having a cheeseburger, right? You can want both. It's good to have both. It's good to have like the fancy steak, and it's good to have like the greasy cheeseburger from the local diner. And not one isn't necessarily better than the other. But life is about both, and this is the fancy steak.
This is a fancy steak. So yeah, it's been a debate back and forth as far as whether or not they have a pacing problem. And for the life of me, I can't figure out what you could possibly cut in this show to kind of speed things up, because everything matters. Like everything is just so full of stuff. There was one podcast that I was listening to, and they said they compared it to like it's like a grudge to get through of, but it's not because it's boring. It's just there's so much coming at you at the time. And on the offhand comment, they talk about like how they're releasing these 3-hour episodes all at the same time. And to that point, it's more of just well, then don't watch them all at the same time. Like this is a lot. I know it's a lot. I said before we even started this that like I've never found myself ever being like that's too much Star Wars. This could be too much Star Wars for people. We're seeing people just drop off. Whether or not they're calling it boring, if they just like can't connect with it specifically. Why do you feel certain people can't connect with this overall? Is it the theme? Is it the characters? Is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, and I'm gonna try not to sound elitist when I say this. This show's just not for everyone.
You said it right there.
No, it's really just the show is not for everyone. Some people like a style of storytelling that is, like I said, it's a little slower, it's a little more deliberative, it's a little more, like heady, right? Intellectual in some ways. Of like I said before, it doesn't hold your hand. There's going to be some things we never get a definitive answer on. We'll get an answer that gets us most of the way there, but there are going to be ambiguities, and there's some things that are just never going to be fully addressed, and we're going to endlessly debate those things. And so there's that element of it, right? There's also the element of, I think we talked in a previous episode about, a lot of Star Wars is escapist, which is great. Skeleton Crew is escapist. It's sort of like a feel good thing. It makes you feel good. This is not escapist, right? This is very much dealing with some really dark, heavy, ugly topics, and ties them into some real world stuff in a way that I feel like largely works. And so that's also not for people too. Some people want just this kind of a show that's sort of just an action escapist action adventure where it's not a lot of nuance. It's they want something that's plot driven. This is a little more character driven, and that's okay. You don't have to like it, uh, but I like it a lot.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job kind of mixing in things like that. This isn't going to be that quippy Star Wars slash Marvel type show or movie where
Yeah.
everybody's throwing quips left and right. Like, this is serious material. I feel that's going to kind of break up a little once we get K2SO like thrown in there, and once we have like a few more characters kind of mixed in. We're starting to see a lot of like levity, but at the same time, potential for kind of breaking that up in these sort of groups that are kind of breaking off and forming their own. One of those big things, like even at the end of like just to skip forward and jump real ahead, at the end of the big tension that you have with Kleya and you have Luthen, and then at the end they just end up like walking away and kind of laughing and joking. It's like ah ha ha, and that's after this like 3 episode arc of there's so much like just trauma and like sadness and different things that you're just trying to overcome. So I feel as though it's there. Like you said, this isn't for everybody. It does touch upon these like serious kind of attributes and stuff like that. One of the just to give just kind of a comparison on the Marvel side, they just came out with the Thunderbolts movie that had come out, and one of the criticisms was that people go to escape and they come to this movie, and this movie is about depression and it's about anxiety and it's about like bipolar, like that sort of thing. And I felt that that was one of the things that made it more interesting. So I'd gone to see it with Jen, and we came out of that movie like it was really, really good. And it's important to have those sort of things not thrown in your face. Like, it wasn't like, oh, this is exactly what this movie is going to be about, and like force the issue, but like Andor, it's just what makes the story. It's part of the story. And that just, helps it excel, as opposed to it just being another Star Wars show about bang, bang, here we go, explosions, blah, blah, and that sort of stuff. I know Tony Gilroy is big on the espionage movies and big on like his whole like kind of background focuses on stories like this. And this is the first time we're kind of seeing it in the Star Wars universe. So just in your face and just so like at such an increase of level and content and everything just kind of thrown there. And I think that's what people are kind of having a hard time just like grasping all at once.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so much escapist Star Wars that like you have enough, you know what I mean? Like give us this one that's just a little darker and like a little more thoughtful, right? Like you have like not all of these are good shows by any means, but like you had Mando and Book of Boba Fett and you know what I mean, and Skeleton Crew and the animated series, and you know what I mean, and maybe Obi-Wan's kind of more down the middle.
Yeah, they
But
just released Tales of the Underworld, and that's 15-minute episodes. Like, it's 6 episodes, 15-minute. Boom, there's your quick in, quick outs, and you're good to go and trot along your day and do your stuff.
yeah, like I said, it's not for everyone. I think Anthony Bourdain was talking about he would much rather someone, if someone tunes into a show and is like, this isn't for me, and they just turn it off. He said, I've never been offended by that because my
Yeah.
shows and my stuff is not for everyone. And that's good. If he's just sort of like, I like, but you got these 1 or 2 things wrong. He's like, that kills me. But like certain things, like not all art is for everyone. And I feel like if you try to make art for everybody, you're really making it for no one.
Yeah, I agree. So let's jump into Andor Season 2, Arc 2, and start off with our buddy Saw Gerrera and just kind of talk about overall, we had talked about how we were going to approach a show and just go story beat by story beat, and then that just won't work. There's too much going on, as you had mentioned before. Like, it's hard to kind of catch on to things. Saw Gerrera's story in particular, just because there's a lot of details going on with Will and his like just hacking machine type thing and the Rhydonium or Rhido and all that other stuff. So what I really kind of want to focus on of just where Saw Gerrera's group is, because now we're getting a real peek into Saw Gerrera's group. Like, who makes it up? There's two tubes. Where did they come from? Why are there so many tubes? tubes. Like Will's now a part of their crew officially. I think it's a good place for him just because everything that he's been through kind of parallels a lot with Saw Gerrera. Like Saw also lost members of his family in this revolution. You know, like Will's by himself. Will feels lost. Like Saw does a great comparison to them being the Rhino, the fuel that burns in this revolution. The stuff that gets burnt out becomes unstable and combustible, and it can go at any time. And I really, really like seeing a group like Saw in this story because you do have the methodical pace of Luthen. You have Andor in there with Bix, and they're showing you like the internal struggle. I do think that this is going to help kind of balance that show as we're talking about, as far as you're just going to have this group that's just going to go up, cause a lot of noise, destroy things, blow things up, and then move on their way. It'll be more than that, but I feel like this is a lot of the pew-pew stuff that people are like really hoping for.
Oh, absolutely. It is the most. I feel like the most potential over the long term of this season is for Saw's group, right? Obviously, we're going to have the Ghorman massacre at some point, and that's going to be action oriented. But before the season's out, I imagine Saw's group is going to engage in one or more cool mission. Otherwise, why spend the time on it? And you know, this is pew pew Star Wars. And I love pew pew Star Wars, and that has to be a part of it too. It can't just be the show. Can't just be people talking in like conference rooms, right? Even though I love the scenes of like people talking in conference rooms, right? You do have to have this is a space adventure, and you do.
I know. I mean, you were the one who came to me after the prequels, and you were like, "There's not enough politics in this. Like, they need to do like a extended cut." Where it's just 3 hours worth of
talking about terror, like they just need to talk about terrorists for like 30, 40 more minutes. If only we had listened.
If only we had paid attention, we would have known. We would have known
about how trade wars lead to despotism.
So I'm talking about Saw. He is a pew pew group, and they're the aliens group. Brian, you love your Star Wars aliens. You love your creatures.
I love a good alien. I love a good. I love a good alien, and this show is it's a little sparse on aliens, right? You can kind of tell it's not really Gilroy's thing. I feel like there were only a couple in the first season. There was that one in the first season. There was that one in like the first episode that Andor owed money to.
That's right. He walked up behind him as a bodyguard of the muscle that really wasn't into his muscleness.
Yeah, exactly. And then later on, there were those like two gross looking things, and they hijack the vehicle from them, and they're like, you could just take the vehicle, it's fine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We hit the fire too. And those are kind of the only, if I recall correctly, those are the kind of the only aliens we get in season 1. Season 2, they've kicked it up a little. There was one alien here who looks like a heavy metal yeti. I don't know how else to describe it. Right. He's got like this long like 80s metal hair, but he's like a abominable snowman with like a big.
It's like Danzig and a Wampa merged into one thing.
Yeah, exactly. I remember years back when they first announced Rogue One, they did a featurette where they were talking about some of the creatures we were going to see in it. And I remember he was in there. I was like, he's really cool looking. And then Rogue One came out. I'm like, I did not see him once in that whole film, which is funny because if you actually go back and watch some of the early trailers and featurettes of Rogue One, there's a lot of footage that did not make the film at all. Like if you go back to watch the first ever teaser trailer for Rogue One, like 70% of that is not
like the TIE fighter flying up behind Jin when she was walking the bridge.
Like the shot of Jin where she turns around and like the thing is lighting up and it's implying that she's like on the dark side and things like that. None of that's in the movie. At all.
Then they have like 8 directors, 37 writers, and
exactly. So to see a really cool alien, and it's important because like you can't lose that part of Star Wars. You do have to have the weird, gross aliens in there. That's part of it. You have to have the freaky Muppets in there, and you know what I mean. It can't be. And I love a good physical set. I love good physical props. I love good puppeteering and costumes and things like that. That even when they look bad or kind of cheesy, they still feel more real and lived in ways that like CGI can't.
Yeah, and you and I were going back and forth as far as whether or not this was filmed on the volume. I was calling it the Void at one point, but the volume, or whether or not it was practical sets. And we did do some research, and we did discover that a lot of them are practical sets. And I love to see that on practical sets. Even in the first season, how you see those random posts online. I know you see them all the time on socials, like you could visit this spot in Star Wars, like go to the UK, and here's a subway station that they ran down, go to this island, and that sort of stuff. So I love that you have that connection, like as far as just real world the real physical things like there. For example, the redwoods in California, is it, where they filmed all Andor, and they started going out. Oh, I have that right here. May the forest be with you. Brought home to me from Jen, Joanna, and Rachel and Rowan. They saw this while they were out there, and they're like, hey, I think this is where they filmed Star Wars. And I'm like, I'm so jealous of you guys. Being there right now in the middle of a woods, I could have been there. But it does.
I think the original Tatooine sets, I think, are still in Tunisia.
Yes.
Sure
so that will be one of our future episodes. We need to do like an on location, like featurettes on our stuff. We'll need that. What do you call it? That I was going to say OnlyFans money. No, what is it called? A Patreon money. There you go. We need that Patreon money or OnlyFans money.
Very different kind of show.
Whatever gets us there first, Brian. You know, I'm willing to show a little shoulder for these,
exactly.
You know, our patrons.
Do my little Twilight dance.
There you go. You know, we got to get out there.
I have a lot of jokes, but I'm just going to move on.
This is a family show. Is it? I always get those things on YouTube. Whenever you upload something, it's like, is this meant for kids? Is this a family show? What it makes me kind of just like rethink our lives. Like, what did you say in that episode that may or may not offend so many people? Yeah. So speaking of broken people and offending people, we're going to jump into our main characters in the sense of those who most of us are kind of emotionally attached to and just really rooting for to get out of there, and that's Bix and Andor. So I mentioned in the very beginning, there's a lot of tension between a lot of groups in this. It's almost as though the rebellion is kind of falling apart, or at least they're just stretching at the seams to kind of keep control of this. And the major example of that is between Bix and Andor. And Bix is kind of one that I don't know, like your thoughts on it. Like, I know exactly why she's acting. I don't want to say that as far as, I know exactly why she's acting, but like, I know why she's acting like this, but it is frustrating. You can see the frustration in Andor as far as how he's trying to hold this together, because at one moment you have Bix guilting him for killing this Imperial officer because he saw her face and that, like, oh, you did this to me and you shouldn't have done that. And, you know, Andor's trying to tell her he chose his side. Like, he chose to work for the Empire. He chose to, you know, be their brute force, and we have to do this. We're in war right now. And so she's guilting him, and then she's talking about, why can't I go out? Why can't I go to the park? Why can't we go shopping? Why can't we just go to the movies and just wander around holding hands? First of all, whose idea was it to put Cassian, the Imperial's most wanted, on Coruscant? Why do you think everybody's in Coruscant? Like, it's, you know, military headquarters, it's Imperial Base 101, and you've got Mon Mothma, you've got Luthen and Kleya, you've got now Andor and Bix. Isn't it a little risky to have everybody?
It's super risky, and at first I was like, that's pretty stupid. Like someone's going to eventually, there's all the cameras, things like that. But I do think there's some wisdom to the idea of, like, I've had this thought experiment of like if either of us had to like go on the lam, you know what I mean? It's just like, these are the things I think about doing.
Go on, but don't tell all the details. Otherwise,
no, don't tell all the details. Well, let's say this. I think folks, when because I've asked many friends this as just sort of a thought experiment, like,
your
24 hours
friends
to go on the land. One of the things I think most people would do is like they would want to go somewhere remote, but like somewhere remote, you would be more likely to be noticed because it's remote. Because if you go to like a small town or like a small planet in Star Wars, like people are gonna be like, "Who's this new weirdo?" You know what I mean? And then they'll call up. There's something about big cities.
I'm a tourist.
Yeah, exactly. There's something about big cities where like people you just put your head down and you don't really look at like your neighbors in like a big bustling city. And Coruscant is like the city of cities, right? It's like if like Manhattan was a planet. So like I buy it. It's one of those things, you either buy it or you don't, you know? Or you kind of have to choose to buy it. You can't think about it too much. And I just decided, like, yeah, all right, that works for me.
Yeah, I've put it in parallel with Cassian's speech in season 1 when Luthen was trying to figure out how he had gotten that like navigational component. Like, it was sealed, it was clearly taken like from the Empire directly, and he just says, like, you know, it was me. Like, it was me, and it's easy. You just walk right in because they can't bear to think that someone like you would be right in there, right under their noses, like walk right into their home and dare just like corrupt their dirty, their glorious capital or wherever it is, just because you walked in, because they think they're beyond their reach, that they're just better than that. And it is just that sort of thing, because even in season 1, when they're turning over cities and trying to find Cassian, building and they don't even realize that they already have him. He's in one of their prisons. He's building this damn Death Star panel connectors and that sort of stuff. So they have the man that they're already looking for, but they just can't like figure it out because of just everything just kind of going around. So, like kind of taking over an entire galaxy is a little hectic in that sense. You just can't really know where all the Nixon screws are kind of going into all this stuff. But yeah, we have Bix just kind of falling apart, just trying to hold herself together at the seams. In one instance, she wants to go out there. She kind of forgets or maybe she's in denial. Maybe she just needs, because you need escapism. We see her as far as just sitting at home by herself. She's become a drop addict here, and she's just watching Good Morning Coruscant. I felt like that was a kind of little bit of throwback to the good old holiday special as well, with that just kind of crazy form of entertainment. And I did get a little Hunger Games from that whole.
Oh, it felt very Hunger Games. There hasn't been much this show that didn't quite work. That didn't quite work for me because we've never seen people watch like TV, and that just felt like that's just a TV. Is there just TVs in Star Wars? When they just want to show something TV, they'll do like a hologram or things like that. And maybe they just didn't have the budget in that moment to make little holograms, and they just decided to like you said, it was like Good Morning America. You know what I mean?
Or
meets Hunger Games.
Maybe they did it directly, and they are using the Star Wars Holiday Special as canon for what Star Wars TV is. Like they're like, okay, we're gonna wipe this off the face of the planet, but the one thing we'll take from it is that this is entertainment in Star Wars. Like we saw it in Skeleton Crew, the little kids playing with the little show, the little acrobat show, and now we're seeing Bix watch Good Morning Hunger Games in Coruscant with the fabulous overblown stuff. And there's a little kind of a hint with this, and it just kind of traces through itself. This is something that that Luthen and Kleya talk about when they're arguing about the Skulden bug that they're ending up trying to have to get out there. But when they're arguing about the importance of it, Kleya throws out the fact that, it's like we learned about the Imperial buyout of the HoloNet. And then you're hearing something else as far as monmothma when she was talking, or some other character talking about the media itself in general. Syril also mentions the media when he's talking to his mother about how they're just spinning propaganda and that sort of stuff. So I feel as though, again, like we had mentioned with tonygilroy, these are little nits that they're throwing into the story where if you blink and you miss it, which just kind of explains, again, why there's so much detail and why there's so much story being driven into there, because it's that kind of reminder of, the Empire runs the media. They're throwing dumb entertainment stuff at you, here's the Masked Singer, or here's this, stuff to kind of distract you from what's really going on. And it's Bix just staying at home, just thinking about all the horrible things that have happened to her and watching that stuff. So you can see why Andor's just kind of going back and forth and struggling with his whole, his loyalty to Luthen and his loyalty to her. And it's when sends Andor out on a mission that I feel as though Luthen came in and he's analyzing Bix as the same kind of way that he sent Andor out to assess Ghorman, is him going on a mission to assess Bix. Because whether or not you agree, I feel as though he was kind of just feeling her out in the sense of whether or not she's worth it, and whether or not he would maybe want to kind of remove her from the equation. Do you think he was actually coming out there to kind of talk to her about a weapons assessment? Or do you think it was more of a recon of, well, if Cassian's out of the picture, like Saul said, accidents happen. So who's to say I can't just send her out on a mission and whoops, Bix didn't make it back. Now I got Cassian all to myself.
Yeah, I think Luthen was playing some head games there. He's trying to sort of suss her out and then suss out their relationship, because I think probably he sees her as a liability on some level too, and was just trying to first ascertain how big of a liability, right? Because she has this sort of drug problem, right? Plus, he probably just doesn't because Luthen's very kind of manipulative like that. Andor is probably best when he doesn't have any attachments. The very fact that Andor wants to come home to Bix is in and of itself is probably a complicating factor for well, I just want to send him on these far-flung missions across the galaxy. And if he has someone he cares about and loves, then that makes him, as a spy, that makes him, weak. It creates a liability for him. I also think there's an element too where I think Luthen, he's stretched really thin, and we get the sense that he's stretched really thin. And I think he also knows that his time is running out, and this sort of phase of the rebellion is going to be coming to an end soon, and it's going to kick off into a new phase, probably with Ghorman. And I think he's wondering like about his legacy. Who's going to take over? He says that to leader, like, you need to stop thinking like a soldier and start thinking like a leader. And so he doesn't know. It's like, is Andor going to take over for me? Is Mon Mothma going to take over for me? Is Kleya going to take over for me? He probably doesn't like any of the options.
No, it's going to be Lonnie. He's going to take over. Lonnie's stepping up hard in this arc, and I'm on Team Lonnie right here. But you're right as far as that assessment, and it's interesting that you say that in the sense that Andor himself kind of says that in the dialogue when he's talking to Luthen, and Luthen is kind of playing on those words where he's trying to throw it back on Andor, and he's like, "Hey, you're going to have to come to a choice one day to know, just to kind of have to determine how much of a problem she is. And if she is that much of a problem, then you're going to have to solve it." And he turns it right back at him. He's like, "No, that's going to be you, isn't it?" Because he knows, like, Luthen doesn't do anything without a reason. And he kind of picks up on the same things we're picking up, that he came out to kind of assess him. And he just gives him the straight ahead, the same he did at the end of season 1, where he was like, and Luthen kind of even mocks him. He's like, "Oh, bring me with me or kill you," like that sort of stuff. Like, "Well, you're in it now. Like, you're in it." And he says, yeah, he's in it, but I believe he says, like, "If you want my blood, like, you're going to have to help me work this out with Bix." So he essentially throws on the gauntlet as far as, and Luthen knows he's serious because he breaks all the protocol. He just shows up to his shop and he's like, "Yeah, knocking on the door, like, open up the door. I know that you're in there. I don't care what weird, like, little story you have to tell. Like, we're going to talk about this now." And we've seen kind of how Kleya reacts when Vel just shows up at the shop and that sort of stuff. And Vel shows up like all elegant and controlled. Andor's knocking that door down. He wants to, like, confront Luthen. He wants it bad. And that's, I feel like though that pushed Luthen and kind of forced him into a corner where he has to realize, I need Cassian, but I have to take him with Bix. It's together or nothing. It's not going to be like the Cinta Vel situation, which we'll get into, where Cinta's on the side where she's like, "Yeah, I love Vel and all, but the mission comes first. The cause comes first." So she's okay just leaving at like months at a time, at years at a time, and never seeing Vel. Whereas Cassian, I feel as though there's a lot of guilt in him for what happened to Bix while he was away. Even like just past relationship stuff. So we know they were together in the past, and we know they broke up as far as that goes. So maybe there's a little bit of like guilt from that too, but you can tell, he really loves her. He feels responsible for her. So it is that ultimatum. It's like, help us out. And, like, I threw out my kudos to Lonnie, and Lonnie comes through in the sense that, like, he kind of discovers where they are hiding Dr. Gorse, and it just kind of falls into a nice little like package for him where he's able to present Bix and Andor, or more of just Bix, like this opportunity of, just self rescue, self strength, just another kind of like step up. We talked about with the sexual assault thing and how important it was for her to overcome that and to take out her attacker and to take out the person who's supporting him. And this even more so, like, she's finally able to get that revenge on the man who destroyed her mind. So do you think we're going to have more big struggles, or do you think this kind of like closes it out as she puts that little torture device on him, walks away, Andor comes out, joins her in the street, presses button, explosion, and that's the end of Dr. Gorse? Yeah. I feel like that was closure for that story. Not to minimize, again, the trauma that's coming for it, but the fact that it's time to move on and have Bix progress to that next stage.
I think this is a show saying we're moving on, right?
Yeah.
I think I am willing to be frustrated by a show if it seems like the frustration is by design. And it seemed like the frustration, or like, you know what I mean? If like, come on, let's move it forward. if they say like, just with patience, you know what I mean? We'll get there. And then there's a reward at the end. And you can kind of tell when a show is frustrating you deliberately, and so that the end is more satisfying, versus a show that just doesn't know what it's doing and is frustrating you accidentally. This is
you leave Game of Thrones out of this.
This is definitely the former. I think they had to not gloss over, right? Because PTSD is a big deal.
Of course.
And I feel like if they were just, if her PTSD was cured in one episode, that wouldn't feel real.
Yeah.
That wouldn't feel right. But now we can, when we check in, we're feeling when we check in on her, she's going to be much more confident and in control and assertive. And we may revisit some of these things in the past, but she's going to be a different person because she's able to put that part of her life behind her. And also, just to harken back to the show isn't for everyone, a different show, a different Star Wars show would have paced this out very differently. You would have seen where Lonnie talks to Luthen, and then Luthen talks to Andor, and then like Andor thanks Luthen. You know what I mean? And then like you would have had those like 4 or 5 extra scenes. Whereas Gilroy is just like, I trust the audience is smart enough that if I lay these out in this order, that they're gonna get that these conversations happened. We just didn't need to see them on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad, and it was so fulfilling just to see that, because you do really root for Bix, you do really root for Andor. These are characters that, like, they, even if you weren't in total agreement with them, and even how I kind of talked about how like Bix was causing that just like tension, and you know what she's struggling with, but at the same time you're kind of like, look, Cassian, can't you see Cassian's trying to do the best that he can? And like, it is that kind of turmoil that she's facing, that you're facing as an audience member, and they just win you over. Like, you're so connected to these characters, and just kind of like you said with the story, like not everything has to be said, and they just kind of like throw you in for the whirlwind there, as far as like, is she going to get out of this? Is he going to get out of this? Like, how are we going to get past this situation? And they just kind of like put it all together in a way that wins you over. And what's great about the way that they tell the story too, as you had mentioned, is that they don't give you those one-to-one scenes where Lonnie talks to him and then Luthen talks to him, because it keeps you kind of guessing as far as where this goes. And that's a perfect little transition into our next buddy, Secret Agent Syril. So when they first introduced Syril, were you under the impression, because Syril had me fooled in the very beginning, his introduction of him, now he's back to Bureau standards, top man at the office, but it's in Ghorman. And you learn a lot about like the conversation of where he is. They did an excellent job of kind of, okay, everybody, here's the info dump on what Cyril's up to now. So with, of course, Edie. I mean, she's got to be there to the end, right? Like, it's going to be like Edie's going to somehow end up being retconned into Rogue One, his mom. And it's just going to be like her like just nagging Krennic. Somehow she becomes like an officer. I would love to see her actually get a position. Uncle Harlow is going to get her a position on a Star Destroyer.
I don't know if you know, Edie blows up Alderaan. She blows up
exactly. It's really, Moff Target, he gives the signal, and it's just Edie who goes, and she leans on it. I would have blown it up from day one. But she does do that info dump of, like, oh, why are you in Ghorman? You had a great job. You broke up with your girlfriend. Yada, yada. Like, she lists everything. Like, okay, so according to Edie, now he has left and given up his position in Coruscant. He has left Dedra behind to pursue his career. He is now amongst the Ghorman, and Edie is a perfect example of the people that the Empire was targeting with the propaganda campaigns. Everything from that meeting that we saw last arc is coming to full fruition. She kind of almost says word for word, like, oh yeah, they think they're better than themselves, they're higher quality, they're living amongst those spiders. Every note that they said in that meeting, Edie is eating up. And then you have Syril defending Ghorman, talking about like, oh, mom, it's just like Imperial rhetoric. You're just listening to propaganda. Ghorman isn't that bad. So at this point, I'm like, like Brian was right. We're going to get that Syril turn. Did they have you fooled with this Syril goodness?
They had me fooled. They had me fooled. Again, a mark of a good show, because like one scene will happen and you think you know what it is, and then like later in the episode and then episodes later, we get additional information and it recontextualizes everything we saw, right?
Yeah.
But even then, at the same time, I think even though Syril was playing it up for the Ghorman Front who was spying on him, I think there's probably a part of him that does believe some of that too, of like the Ghorman people aren't bad people. And so,
I know.
yeah, and it's true. That scene was great because, one, like you said, it was a great exposition dump. It was great because it also revealed, in Edie's mind, they're broken up and he took this far off job and nobody knows why, but it was all part of Dedra's master plan here, where she's the puppet master, many systems away, is basically controlling the politics of it very deftly. And it also just shows how much the propaganda has worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the political side of the show. There's this there's this great essay If I can be political just for a bit, and don't worry, I'm not going to be partisan or anything like that.
On an Andor review show? No.
Andor review show.
How dare you?
There is this great essay where there's this author, the 20th century author named Umberto Eco. He wrote his famous book is called The Name of the Rose. He grew up in fascist Italy, and he wrote this essay, and this was years ago. This was like 25 years ago, I think, when he wrote the essay, maybe even longer, called Fascism, where he says, fascism is an ideology, or the things that make fascism, right? And believe it or not, no one had really kind of written it down of like, what is the definition of it? And he's like, all right, to be a fascist ideology, you have to have these 14 things. And one of the things in there is the idea is an enemy, and the enemy is both very weak and very strong at the same time. And this is kind of one of the key insights of like understanding authoritarianism and things like that, is that there's a lot of contradictions, and if you try to think about it too much, none of it makes sense. But it's supposed to like play on like both sides of it, because they're very weak, so you hate them because they're weak, but they're also strong and they're taking advantage of you. And you hear that when you talk about Edie talk about Ghorman, and when we saw in that meeting with propaganda ministry, it's sort of like today where people will say like oh, those immigrants, they're so lazy and they're taking our jobs. We're like, well, which one
Yeah.
is it? It can't be both. Right. And it's the same thing with the Gormans, right? Either they're this sort of like, they think they're better than us. You know what I mean? Either there's like these snooty aristocrats, or they're these like greedy little trashy people. And in the Imperial imagination, they're kind of both, even though they kind of can't be both. So it just goes to show how thought out the Empire is with the propaganda, and just how thought out Gilroy has laid the story of like, how do you get a galaxy to dehumanize what was a very powerful and rich planet and very beloved planet. It sounds like it's like, how do you get people to buy into a genocide, right? How do you convince people over time to dehumanize? It's scary stuff.
And there is a reveal in here, and we'll get more into it when we actually talk about the whole like Ghorman Front, because I really want to focus on all that they kind of reveal, and I'm like, oh, I thought that was part of this. So this has happened before. So the Empire definitely has something, like they have their work cut out for them as far as how they're going to justify like what is about to happen, I feel, in this next 3 episodes, because it isn't the first time that this has happened. And it's not even the first time that this has happened on Ghorman, which we learn later on. So there's all these little like intricate details that are all these, not to be a pun on Ghorman, but all these little spider webs that are being weaved in there. So we do learn that no, Syril is just he's playing a secret agent, or what is it called, a spy, or whatever you want to insert name here. So he's spying on Ghorman, Ghorman's spying on him. And what Syril doesn't know is that the ISB is spying on Syril, which is very, very interesting. They haven't revealed the extent of their plans, but there is a little Partagaz and Dedra kind of union there that's going on behind Cyril's back. So he does inform them of their, like, what he learns in Ghorman, and he comes back home to Dedra, and we get yet another loving moment for our favorite couple in Star Wars. Get out of the way, Padme and Anakin. Move over, Han and Leia. We've got Dedra and Syril, and we have him exposition dumping again everything that we've already learned as an audience to her, and just kind of confirming that. And they've got an hour to kill, Brian. So what do you think they talked about for that hour with the lights off? Just, over in Dedra's apartment. Mostly spiders. So the main question that I have for you is, do you think Dedra actually cares about Syril? Or do you think she's playing him? Now, it's hard to take that into consideration, just because we've seen seductions in the past, and we've seen the way that certain spies, and I'm giving Syril his credit as a secret agent type spy thing, like certain spies are foiled by, the seductress that comes and lures them with kindness, and, just their overall like sex appeal, and like the things that they do to kind of like sneak their way in. And Dedra is just dead on, dead-eyed, just, all right, turn off the lights. This is going to happen now. And like, she doesn't comfort him. We kind of talked about this in the last arc, where he was kind of like reaching out his emotions to her, and she just grabbed his face, and she's like, this is how this is going to be. And it's like, okay, there we go. So that normal stereotypical seduction and like lure isn't particularly there with Dedra. She's just kind of straight faced. So it's hard to kind of imagine that she actually does care for him or that he's just a means to an end.
It's probably somewhere in between, and that's why it's great, right? I think she does have some affection for him. I really don't think, 'cause she was living with the guy. You know what I mean? That would be a level of spycraft, like that level of dedication if she faked the whole relationship. But at the same
I
time,
don't
yeah,
know.
she is using him, right? The number of people, how many people do you think actually know the full plan of what's going on in Gorman, right? Her,
It's got to be that
Pargaz,
room, the boardroom, right?
yeah, maybe not even everyone in the boardroom. Maybe just like her, Pargaz, Krennic, and maybe the
Krennic.
Emperor. If the
If
Emperor,
the
this is,
Emperor.
you also get the vibe that this is maybe just a little bit off the books, too.
Yeah.
So
The
it's
Emperor
good to
would never
know.
allow this to happen.
No, the
Just
Emperor
saying.
never.
Just saying. He'll never let this happen. He's a
No.
misunderstood guy. So what do you think the end game is for Syril? Because they don't really need him to kind of trigger what's next to happen. So we do have the incident that ends up being the climax of this kind of arc as far as Ghorman and what happens there. But I feel as though after that, like, wouldn't that be enough? If they wanted to pull Syril out, that would be a good time to kind of pull him out. But Partagas, even after that, he says Syril must never know what's really going on. Like, what is it, their lack of confidence in him? They think he'll slip up, or it's just that he is going to take that fall. We talked about that. You had brought it up before, that little glass ceiling, was it, that you mentioned about Dedra
Oh, the
and the kind of
glass
thing
cliff
that,
that they're gonna
there
blame
you
her
go.
for? Yeah, yeah.
So I feel as though
It's
they're kind of setting that up for Syril. Something's going to happen, and Cyril's going to be the one who goes down and kind of that poster boy hero of, look, this brave agent to the Empire fell against these horrible Gorman people. Or would he be a traitor to the Empire?
at the start of the season, I considered, like, it was one of my predictions that he would eventually betray the Emperor. I don't know if I really feel that way anymore. I think
I
his
think more
loyalties.
so, would they say he betrayed the Empire
That no, that is
to
I feel
excuse
like,
his
yeah.
death?
Yeah, I could see him being a fall guy. I could see Didra being a fall woman. I don't know. It's like it's so tough because it could go either way, right? Because they don't really need him anymore. The plan is in motion, right? But he's also he really loves being a spy. So I could also see him getting in the way of, like, no, I'm gonna, like, do spy things and, like, get out of here, you idiot.
I just bought a new suit.
Exactly. He really, and it's a contrast with Andor too, because Andor is a real spy and
Yeah.
Syril is a pretend spy. And
Where do you draw the
Andor,
line?
yeah, Andor knows he's being played. Like, him and Luth, like there's a kind of honesty between Luthen and Andor, where Andor knows that Luthen is not fully trustworthy, and Luthen doesn't pretend to be fully trustworthy. Luthen doesn't pretend that he's giving Andor all the information, and then there's sort of like, it kind of works. Whereas I think Cyril really thinks he's, like, in on it, like,
Yeah.
super guy. You know what I mean? The like, and they really need me. No, he's just he's just a pawn, and he doesn't really know. He doesn't know that his own romantic partner is playing with him. And I don't know. I have a
I
question. This might be another year today. What does the Bureau of Standards do?
I
What
feel
did
like
they
they're
do?
I feel like, okay, so I have a healthcare background, and what I feel as though they are is like a oh my god, like a compliance. I feel as though they're like a compliance department, because he mentioned something about an audit. And that just kind of put me back to like real world past experience where I worked for a health plan, and they have compliance, like a compliance department that makes sure that they're doing things in check in case they're ever audited, that the plan or whatever it is that's being audited is like checking off these things. It's
Yeah.
hard to imagine that that even needs a purpose because they're in an empire. Like, oh, that's right, the emperor is a good guy. So if he sees they're not doing anything by the book, that they're just going to penalize them and flag them and that sort of stuff. I don't know. It's the Bureau of Standards. Like, what was the?
It's
Hold on, I wrote
I
it down here.
it's so the name is so
Bureau of
generic
Standards.
that, yeah,
Yeah,
it's such a generic name that it's almost like a joke of, like, you don't
yeah.
really need to know. You just know that they're a bureaucracy, right? But I want to know. I want to know what are they doing all day?
And they go to him specifically, and that's actually probably a great transition into the whole Ghorman Front and where Sarah plays into that, is that they are trying to get information from Syril, because even though he's in the Bureau of Standards, apparently that's a great position for you to get information for, which kind of moves it back to that more of just like a compliance and like code type maybe department. I'm sure the interwebs has the actual definition of what the Bureau of Standards does, but
Yeah.
Syril seems to have information on the Empire's like day-to-day operations, and even things as far as like what's being transported, like who's on duty, that sort of stuff, which they kind of bring up in the whole Ghorman thing, where they talk about like, oh yeah, everything's here, the itemized lists, the staff, the schedules, yada yada. So maybe it is that sort of like he's just a like numbers guy, and it's the great work, Brian. He's doing the great work, you know. The Empire has their Lumen department, and he's just doing the great work for all.
The work is mysterious. The work is mysterious and important.
Exactly. That's what they do.
Yeah.
So I did like his little tantrum. I liked when he threw, obviously it was off for show, but when the ISB comes in, he's like, how dare you enter my office? They're like, oh, we're suspicious of like there's devices and this. Well, that's gonna have to wait. We have an audit. And they're like, yeah, no. And they drag him off, like practically screaming. I'm telling you, man, like you said, Cyril's not really a spy. He's a spy. He's no variant guy, but he's got like, you know, his little looks and he's there going like, I just think he needs a little more experience, you know, be put in the field a little more, and he, you know, he'll be the best. He's going to take down the entire rebellion by himself, or just probably die in the next arc. So we jump into.
I was going to say, I did see one prediction online that, and I don't know if this is how it's going to end, but someone online predicted that Syril and Dedra are going to end up together officially on the Death Star, and that's going to be the end of the season. And the implication being that they both get blown up on the Death Star, which would be a dark ending. Anyway,
I mean, we'd lose Edie there too, right? Because she's on the Death Star, but
she's blown up Alderaan.
I think that'd be a great. I think that'd be a great end for Dedra's character and her arc as far as this goes. I feel like Syril isn't making it out of Ghorman in itself, because I think the destruction and stuff like that, can't remember if in the trailers we've seen him actually in the middle of the action when there's explosions and gunfires and that sort of stuff that they showed, whether or not he's in it or if it's just clever editing. I do remember that scene where everybody was jumping on and saying like, oh my God, Darth Vader's in this, because Dedra's actually being choked by something and you see her fighting with her collar. I think that's more of a panic attack and anxiety for maybe she does care about Syril, and that's her just kind of realizing like what she's done to him, and that might just be like the reaction to that. So I don't think Cyril's making it out of Ghorman. I think Dedra might, but I also wouldn't be surprised if she gets wiped out on that too. I kind of want that, especially now that they kind of shifted gears with the Grand Moff Tarkin involvement. Like, and by shifting gears, I mean I misremembered exactly where that was. So like, I feel as though they're gonna have to do more in this Ghorman massacre for it to be something. Like they have to have like a big, I don't know, some big highlighting point that makes it like a big massacre. It can't just be a bunch of protesters being shot at and gassed and that sort of stuff. I feel like we're going to have like heavy losses on both sides.
Oh, it's going to be brutal, right? It's going to be brutal because you have to believe at this point that the Empire has killed civilians many times before. And so it has to be something that would to actually get the whole galaxy's attention. It has to be really bad. They can't just be that they, you know, I mean, that there was a riot, and because that's what happened on Ferrix, and nobody cared, right? Like a riot got under control, and we never revisit Ferrix, but I imagine Ferrix got punished pretty severely after the riot. But the Empire at large, like the planets didn't seem to affect them. But maybe it's great parallel. Is a popular and wealthy place, but we'll see.
Yeah, a great parallel. And our if you're doing a drinking game and you're waiting for Danny to reference Rebels, this is your time to take a shot, guys. Because if for those who have seen Rebels on Lothal, after the whole incident happens on Lothal and the rebel activity and that whole like big ordeal happens there, when Ezra and the gang return after a long period of time, Lothal's just wrecked. The Empire's destroyed it. It's all burnt down. Like it's just a shell of what it used to be. So I'd imagine if they ever do go back to Ferrix, that's what you'd get. Just a big Imperial presence. I don't know if it's even worth just for them sticking around. They may have just punished them and made an example of them and just moved on. Maybe they were a target practice for the early Death Star blasts or things like that. But I imagine it's going to be that parallel between what we saw in Rebels happen in Lothal and what we saw happen in Ferrix after their little uprisings. So what we do learn a lot about Ghorman through Syril. Not only is he acting as a spy for the Empire, he's also acting as kind of our eyes and ears in the Ghorman Front. And you had mentioned what has happened before on Ghorman and what the Empire's involvement in, and we get just everything back to exposition, back to information. We hear from different people. So what I was a little confused about was this meeting. So Secret Agent Syril gets invited to the meeting by this guy who we're going to end up resenting late at the end of this arc. Sam, he's one of the people of the Ghorman Front whose his cover is selling little spiders to people in the town square. And in that one meeting that he has with Syril, he kind of sneaks him a message with a location to this meeting. But they also say it was like a town hall meeting. So why the secrecy in that, right? Like it was a public forum.
It's like a semi-open town hall, I guess.
Yeah.
Like an invite-only town hall where they can, it's weird that for someone of Syril's stature would know that, like, hey, all the people of the city are getting together to complain about the Empire.
And at this point, the Empire hasn't shut down the people's ability to protest and gather, because we see that both in the Andor perspective and through Syril's perspective. You see all these protesters gathered there protesting the Empire. And in this meeting, we learn a lot more. You learn that a little bit through the bellhop who interacts with Cassian as well. And mostly in this meeting where you have different characters kind of spewing out like their understanding or their suspicion of things, because no one really knows what's going on. So we have one character, and I have a theory about this guy. And I'm going to jump ahead and look for his name here because I noticed Citizen Lezine.
Is he the big dude?
Yes,
the big burly
he's
dude?
the Ghorman Brazo. So big dude, kind of has that same stature, same build. So he's spouting out in the meeting about how, we're seeing the Empire relocate people. They're tearing up the city. They're running transports at night. They're taking over businesses. And we all know that there's an armory being built here. And then, of course, that's when Caro, who he's a leader of the resistance. So we have Caro Rylands and his daughter Enza, and we have Sam, and we have another guy whose name I can't remember. So these are kind of our leaders. Caro has kind of a Luthen thing going on where his business or cover is his like a twill kind of manufacturer. So he's got his fancy little like persona as well. I love that everybody in the rebellion has these super fancy high-end, high echelon type personas where they go and they're pretty, and then they go into the deep dark dungeons of the rebellion and they start plotting the stuff. So apparently this guy is out there and he's spouting these things as far as like they're building an armory. And then we hear from somebody else from Ghorman talking about how, Ben, we're going back to those taxations, back to fees. They're changing shipping lane codes in ports like that. They're putting on tariffs that are making them different. And then you have an elderly woman who specifically talks about the Tarkin massacre. And this is kind of what threw me off, because in my recollection, I thought that the Ghorman massacre was when Grand Moff Tarkin killed those peaceful protesters by landing his starship on top of them. It turns out that was the first Ghorman massacre. So fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, what's happening, Ghorman? How does this happen again? So it was. So apparently this had happened 16 years ago prior to where they are. And it kind of puts into context that big monument that's in the middle of the town is an actual monument for a memoriam of what happened that day. And a big reason why the people are all up in arms is that the Empire promised that they would never do anything to kind of disrupt that, let alone cast a shadow on this monument, which means so much. And that's exactly what's happening as they're building this army in the middle of the town. So we do learn all this different stuff that's happening in Ghorman, and the whole Tarkin massacre thing kind of threw me for a whirlwind as far as how is the Empire even allowed back here after what happened? Like, how is that not causing any appeals in anything whatsoever? What's going on, Brian? How are they back? How are they back? And I say that just kind of remembering the situation that we're currently in. How is it happening again? But it is. So how are they back on Ghorman and just kind of getting away with it?
Yeah, I get the vibe I get from the Ghorman Front is, even though that they're disorganized and they're new to this sort of revolution thing, I get the vibe that as a group they've actually been around for a long time, but they're
Yeah.
mostly talk, right? And so I could kind of see that they're this sort of group of like activists, and eventually, you know what I mean, that they protest a lot, and maybe even a few of them are revolutionaries, but they're not rebels. But it's only been in the events of the last several months where they're like, okay, now we're going to have to put our, our money where our mouth is, and we're going to have to actually oppose the empire instead of just being protesters. That's the way I kind of square it.
Yeah. So they do. So Syril is in that meeting and he starts talking to them, and it's interesting when they approach him because of the way they approach him. Now, you could consider it just them trying to be cautious about luring an Imperial in there because their words are very specific. And there has been some debate that I've seen as far as whether or not they're genuine about this or whether or not it's them just trying to kind of lure Syril over to their side. Because when they talk to him and they're asking him, it's very like well put, very elegant as far as how Kara approaches him. And he's like, what would be your suggestions as to how to get the empire to hear our pleas? Like, how can we plead to them? How can we get them to listen to us? We need an advisor. And he's like, oh, I don't think I'm allowed to do that. He's like, well, I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. We just need somebody to guide us. Like, and they mentioned something, and that kind of caught me off guard too, where they're like, oh, we're under the belief that the emperor doesn't even know what's going on, that the ISB has created a shadow government and they're opting to their own free will and they're doing all this behind his back. And Syril's like, yeah, I feel that too sometimes. So do you think they actually believe that the ISB is kind of doing all this and that they're still under the guise that, oh, the emperor is doing great things for the galaxy, like he's really bringing peace and justice to this, and that these people are just, they're on their own, they're going rogue, like this isn't like what the emperor's vision was?
I think that was just a little bit of flattery that they were just trying to, they were just trying to, gas them up a little of like, like, oh, you're so good at your job and we love the empire.
Yeah.
There's this one rogue, rogue organization over here, and they're building this big armory, but we know that you're like, that's just, they're playing politics. Like I said, they're politicians and activists and things like that, and a few revolutionaries, but they're not rebels. And so that's the game that Ghormans play, but that game obviously doesn't work anymore because they're building this big ass armory in the middle of the largest city.
Yeah, and you said it best. They are not rebels. And that we hear about their plans. So apparently what Syril kind of feeds to them in his like data disk and that sort of stuff is the fact that they are indeed transporting weapons. It doesn't say it specifically. It says military supplies or something like that they kind of pick up on. So they plan on hijacking these convoys, stealing these weapons, and essentially from what Cairo tells Cassian, they're going to just show it to the people. So they're going to steal all these weapons and they're going to show the people of Ghorman, look, the empire has been lying to us all this time. Here are the weapons that we took from them. Like it's all lies, deceptions, every day more lies. And that is going to turn the Ghormans back against the empire and get them out and just kind of be that revolution that they're looking for. So it's almost as though they're naive. And Cassian tells them straight up, he's like, no, the hardest thing of any heist is getting away. You guys plan on staying here and then showing off and bragging about it. That's suicide. So what I really found interesting was everyone's common opinion on Ghorman. And Luthen gives Cassian a lot of flack for this because he's convinced that Cassian's just, he just wanted to get back to Bix, that sort of thing. But Cassian tells him straight up, like, no, like these people are anxious. They're nervous. They're just unorganized. They're not experienced. Like they started this too late, he says. They started too late and now they're trying to make like a name for themselves and it's just going to end badly. And Luthen's just under the impression that even if it does end badly, at least it'll be that, flare that's going to ignite the rest of the galaxy to see just how bad things are. And he's kind of right, because we are seeing a lot in history and even just like throughout current events and that sort of stuff that no one really acts unless something big happens. You see all these little minor things. If it's happened, like you said, if they're just getting rid of immigrants who are bothered, that sort of stuff. But then when they start turning on citizens, they start turning on this, like then it becomes an issue. And Luthen's very aware of this. Unless something big happens and someone does fall, then no one's going to be the wiser about it. Cassian's under the thought that, the only attention that they're going to get, the Ghormans, by robbing this place and showing the weapons that the Empire's feeling about and throwing around, the only attention they're going to get is the Empire. And that's going to be an issue. And even like I said before, when Syril's reporting the Partagaz, he's like, yeah, like they're unorganized, they're eager, so they're going to make mistakes, that sort of stuff. And then we go back to Saw. Again, to Saw when he was going on his rant, when he talked about how bad the Maya Pay Brigade was. And one of the people who talks about the Ghormans, they're all lost. So you have three different perspectives from three different main characters saying the Ghormans are an issue, they're a problem, and Luthen doesn't listen to this. And this is what leads to the fall of one of my favorite characters, who I really, really wanted to see, like, just kind of because she was just an absolute badass, and I wanted to see just kind of her missions and her kind of ordeal. And there's this little line that she throws, and I'm like, oh man, I really wish I would have seen what happened there. And after Cassian had given his report, even before I think Luthen returned home, he radios Kleya and he's like, yeah, this package, his shop speak, oh, the package wasn't what I expected it. It's like, but we were working on another deal, right? And Kleya's like, yeah, it's already there. So they already knew that Cassian was going to back out of this, and they had Vel ready to go on Ghorman, and they had Cinta meet up with her. And these are our two new go-to people. And I kind of feel that was super reckless of Luthen, and it ends up like just turning out for the worst. So I don't even know how to pose this question. Why do you think maybe Luthen was just sending Cassian out there to get him out so he can focus on Bix, and wasn't really interested in his feedback because he already knew what Cassian told him, that it was just a lost cause and that only Vel and Cinta would be loyal enough to take on this lost cause? But if he knew it was going to be a failure like they were talking about, why risk losing two of your best agents?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. I think part of it is I really do think Luthen is trying to size up Cassian and be like, can Cassian take over for me? And that's sort of part of it. Because the Cassian's mission is not a typical spy mission. It's more in keeping in the kind of stuff that Luthen would do himself, which is like, I'm going to go on this mission and sort of size you up and think like a leader, think strategically. You know what I mean? Offer sort of like a grand vision, where like, and then Cassian doesn't seem interested. He's just sort of like, these people are amateurs, and Cassian's right. They are.
Yeah,
they aren't
don't
ready.
waste time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting. There's an interesting parallel because Partagaz says when he was talking, I think he was talking to Syril, when there was like, calibrate your enthusiasm. You know what I mean?
Oh no, that was Hertz and. The whole Gorse thing when he put them on the project of like, you guys are going to be in charge of this.
Yeah, I'm mixing it up in another part where he tells Syril about someone, the dangers of someone who is eager and inexperienced.
Correct.
And that's sort of like the Ghormans, they're eager and inexperienced. And so I think Luthen, in his typical Luthen-y way, like, has multiple schemes and plans. And one scheme is like, is Cassian ready to take over for me? Answer, no. Right? And he's like, okay. And I don't think he thinks that Val or Cinta are ready to take over for him either. And so he's like, well, if Cassian's not ready to do that level of spycraft or diplomacy or whatever, then I'm just going to send two of my best soldiers to help with the mission. Because these people are clearly very inexperienced and in over their head.
Yeah, and that, to me, it's kind of, and I've been picking up on this, I don't know if you have as much, this Luthen unraveling, and he's kind of, and they pretty much say it in dialogue within itself when he argues with Kleya about what happens with the Skuldran little listening device and that sort of thing, but he just outright admits that he's just there's too much, like the network's too big. He can't remember it all. Like there's too many moving parts. And I feel as though that was kind of just his submission into the fact that he's losing a handle on this rebellion. And we kind of talked, well, not necessarily we kind of talked about it. They talked about it, Kleya and Luthen, when they were arguing in the first season about like, like you're slipping, you're doing this, like you shouldn't be doing that sort of stuff. Like it had a great laugh and we're kind of jumping back and forth, but it does really twist itself into one another, where Kleya and Luthen, where she tells him about the listening device that could be picked up in Skuldran. So what Skuldran apparently discovers is that one of the pieces in his art collection ends up being a forgery. So he's really upset about this. And it happened at the worst kind of time. And this is Vesty week, but we'll get into Vesty week. It's what they were talking about on the TV when Bix was watching the TV or the Good Morning Coruscant show. It's a big ordeal where all the senators and the newly elected politicians and everybody gets together and exceptionally look at me and how great I am. So Skolden's supposed to have this big show at his house. And now there's an item in his collection that's a forgery. So they can't get rid of it now, but after this party, we're going to go through every single piece of art that we have and make sure everything's good. And it just so happens that they put a little listening device in one of the pieces that they sold him, and now they have to figure out how to get it out. And Luthen just loses his mind and just starts blaming Kleya. And when she just turns out and she, like a mother to a little kid, are you done? Because here's what we're going to do. And within that rant, he's talking about how he can't control it anymore. He can't remember everything. Everything's so I feel as though there is Luthen unraveling, and that will lead to that kind of demise that we're seeing is going to happen. Like while he's losing track of it and trying to pick his predecessor at the same time, I feel as though he is making mistakes. And the fact that he was so eager about Ghorman before it was even on his radar, because it wasn't until Lonnie informed him that Dedra was moving from Project Axis to now leading Ghorman that he just kind of switched gears. He's like, all right, what's the end game here on Ghorman? Like, we need to figure this out. Like, just throw in Cinta and Vel in there and kind of get it there. And he's making mistakes and he's not thinking of the upper consequences. And we know this from Luthen from before, but those decisions he made were more calculated. These, I feel, are more sloppy or just not as well thought out.
Yeah, he's getting paranoid. He's a little spooked, and you can tell he's getting paranoid. And it is funny because that whole mission to me, and they shot it and they they staged it all in a very dramatic and exciting way, right? But it really just as a thing, it's just like this doesn't seem that big a deal, right?
Yeah,
it's just
we're just taking.
First of all, they made the listening device really huge, which is like how big is this thing? It's like a podcast microphone. Like
it is. It's sponsored by Sure.
Yeah, and like she takes off the top of it. I was like, okay, then that's it. But no, she has to like undo the whole thing.
Yeah,
like, unscrew the whole thing, and like that scene felt like, again, it was well directed and well shot and all of that, and it was exciting, but it was also a little dumb. And there was the cool shot of like the blood coming down her fingers, but at the same time, I was like, that's way more conspicuous than like Skolden's gonna look and be like, why is there blood all over my floor? Which is more than just like, he's also like a gangster, and so like I don't think he would automatically be like, someone's listening to me, it must be my antiques dealer. You know what I mean? He's clearly a rebel spy. It just seemed like they were spun up for something like, yeah, it's obviously in danger, but like they're in danger all the time. This didn't seem to need to be as big a deal, but I think he knows he's stretched too thin and he's very paranoid. And I think he senses this thing is all very close to unraveling, right? Because like any spy, like I've heard this line from people who like work in the CIA or whatever, which is like, you have to, like, out of 100 times, you have to get all 100 right, because the bad guys only need to get it right once. Right? If Luthen makes one mistake, he's dead. It's over. The whole rebellion is over. So he can't ever make a mistake, and that's going to lead to a lot of paranoia.
Yeah, and it's something that also it's tearing apart his team, because as I joked about in the beginning, everybody's fighting with one another, and one of the big things that you reveal from Cinta and Vel is that they wanted to, and it was something that Vel had said. She's like, well, we're going to have a talk about this, because Cinta also admits that she's very aware of the fact that Luthen sees them more valuable apart than together. And they both reveal when they first meet that they only agreed to do this mission if the other was involved. And that was their one, like, just, I'm not doing this unless Vel's there. I'm not doing this unless Cinta's there. And then we learned in their dialogue that apparently Cinta had gotten into an accident and she was out of commission for about a year. So was it when she was taking out Tay? Was there oh no, the car accident, and that was her solution as to how to kill Tay, and she just got caught up in that? She didn't get out in time. That was some mission that I would love to see.
Together. Yeah. No, that's good. That's probably it. Like something probably happened in that mission around that time, right? And it sounds like there was a bit of a breakup with them before that. or
Yes.
you know what I mean. And then Cinta was out of commission for a year, and then has this epiphany, right? But it also it shows, like I said, very similar to the Bix and Cassian thing, right? Luthen doesn't like his soldiers to have liabilities, right? And
Hmm.
spies in love are a liability if they have people, you know what I mean, that can be used against them, and or any kind of leverage. That's bad. So he wants to keep them apart. In the same way, he wanted to keep Cassian and Bix apart, but he realized he couldn't. So he realized they were a package deal.
In a very unique way, I saw it as similar to the whole Jedi mythology of not having connections. Like ties
No
make you
attachment.
weak.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
attachments make, not that attachments make you weak, but they cloud your judgment. They like, that's how like attachments and necessities, you know, that's how you turn to the dark side, because that sort of stuff. It is very just fascinating to see those different, such a variety of different groups within the galaxy, but there is that constant try to pull apart. And we know from George Lucas that family is very important to him, and I feel this was intentional, that there's these different groups, no matter their intentions as far as what they hope to accomplish or what they hope to just avoid, but it is that kind of just pulling families apart and pulling connections apart, where we see that the rebellion doesn't succeed until it's together. And it is just that way. And everybody's kind of picking up on it, but nobody wants to admit it until it's kind of too late. And you know, yeah, like it was just kind of interesting to me when she said that thing, and I was picking it up again through Bix and Cassian and just kind of putting it all in there. And I'm like, yeah, like this clearly is one of those situations where it's another one of those examples. Like, yeah, like you can't have the connections, like they make you weak, family makes you weak, this sort of thing make you weak. And I think it's something that Luthen wants them to get to. Again, we don't really know what happened to Luthen as far as like what he lost to get into this. And maybe he's being protective. Maybe he doesn't want them to suffer what he suffered as far as what it took to get him to where he is, this rebellion. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to Vel. So we do have that situation in which something goes wrong in their heist. And it's Sam, that guy who was just constantly causing problems and all up on himself. When they had their meeting, Vel was very specific, and she told them, if you can't listen, then tell me now, because you are not part of this mission. We will walk away. Only Cinta and I will have guns. That's it. We'll only have blasters. It's just the two of us. No one else is bringing blasters. Guess who brings a blaster? Guess who slips up? And guess who kills Cinta? It's Sam. But the interesting part to me was, again, this citizen Lezine shows up. Like, just in that time. And it's for somebody who was so against the empire, or at least that's what he was portraying in these meetings and yelling and giving his like, you know, like flipping off people in the meeting and that sort of stuff, so aggressive against it. Why was he so concerned about what was going on when a downed like Imperial transport was being kind of overtaken by Ghormans? And then when Sam ends up shooting Cinta, he's the first guy who kind of goes up and grabs Cinta and just kind of walks off. I felt it was a weird kind of situation in the fact that they let this guy who caused the issue take Cinta. I know he didn't kill her. It was Sam's random shot, but it's just too convenient for him to kind of be in that place at that time.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the fact that, like, again, it's just that the Gormans aren't ready. They're not ready, and
Yeah.
Vel and Cinta say over and over, it's not about what you can do; it's about can you follow orders, right? Like, it's not that you all can't do the individual parts to this. It's like, if I say XYZ, that means XYZ because you don't have all the information and I do. And I'm the one who has to make all the decisions. And I feel like there's a little bit of that. So when he stumbles on this like downed Imperial thing, he's like, "You idiots! I could do this better than you." You know what I mean? And like it starts a fight. They're just not ready. They're not an army, right? There's no chain of command. They don't respect each other. They don't trust each other enough. They're not organized enough.
I also found it odd that there were no stormtroopers in these transports or any security whatsoever. Were they automated transports? Because when they
I don't
took out
think
the
so.
track,
It looked like one shot where there was someone inside the vehicle.
okay,
Yeah, but it was just like you just kind of see a shadow of someone in there, and I don't know if it was a droid or a person because I have the same thing of like, did the Gormans kill someone? I don't. It doesn't seem like they killed anyone,
yeah,
right?
and those no, because usually I'm used to them blowing up like a convoy or something, and then a bunch of stormtroopers fled out and start shooting. I know that that was part of Partagas's plan, like, oh, hold off the reinforcements until XYZ happens, because they do mention it, and they tell when Syril's kind of standing up there in the little building, kind of feeding them the information. He's like, okay, now call the reinforcements. We got what we needed. Somebody shot, that sort of stuff. But it was just a little odd that there wasn't anything else like protecting these convoys. And maybe it was the Empire doing that purposely so that people weren't looking at it and be like, what are these stormtroopers?
Yeah, it's like a honeypot kind of thing.
Like what's going on there? But yeah, unfortunately, we lost Cinta. And, especially with her cool little parkour move over that transport when she blows it up and stuff like that. That's when I was thinking I would love to see just different Cinta missions. Like maybe they'll do a Tales of the Rebellion type spinoff where they have just 3 episodes on kind of her backstory, because they do kind of reveal as far as like, oh, the stormtroopers like wiped out her entire family, so she hates them. So again, you kind of want to see these things. And with as much content and much information and details that we're getting in these episodes, you could always think of, man, you can add more. Like there can be another season and you can just add more to this and have 2 more seasons of Andor. Like there's so much that you can throw in here. So I think they're doing an excellent job with the pacing. It's just, we just are so used to things being so spread out or just so kind of short and that sort of stuff that it might just be this kind of like, we're getting it all and then we just want more. Like, I want more. Is that so hard to ask for? I want us to be covering 5 episodes of Andor, maybe not the same night, but just going through that little arc as far as that goes. So yes, we lose Cinta. It's unfortunate. And Vel just rips into Sam, telling him like she was a warrior. She did this, she did that, she did that. And all for you, a sniveling boy. And she just rips into him as far as that goes. And I felt like it could have been worse as far as what Vel was feeling at that point in time. But I feel as though that was her role in the rebellion stepping up. Like you had mentioned about being a leader and that sort of stuff, how she's not necessarily guilting him, but more saying like, this is what happens when you mess up. You will live with this for the rest of your life and you're going to have to make up for it every day that passes from here on in. Make her sacrifice worth it because you just caused this. So I do think that was a Vel clearly heartbroken, but also making sure that it didn't just overwhelm her. Although she did kind of fumble onto it and just was laying there next to the body when she discovered Cinta, and the other girl, I forget her name, had to kind of grab her. And I can't remember if it was Enza or is the blonde girl who's just supposed to be driving the transport, but like they kind of shook her out of it. But Vel kind of stepped up in the worst moment possible. And I think her presence on Ghorman, she's not going to leave. She's in this for the end of it. Just like we have Will kind of with Saw and him accepting it. I feel as though this is Vel's mission. Like this is going to be it. Like she's there to the very, very end.
Yeah. And I think Cassian will be back, or Varian Sky will be back on Ghorman at some point, right?
I don't even think it's going to be Varian Sky. I think after this happens, it's going to be all hands on deck with Ghorman. Because I feel as though Vel is going to feed them that information that, yes, they are building an armory here. And yes, this is happening and so on and so forth. I can't remember if Cassian actually told him that they're building an armory there, or if he just informed them that they were trying to like cause some rabble-rousing with the Empire. Like, I just can't remember, but I do feel we're just going to get Cassian as Cassian. I think we've seen the last of Varian Sky. I wish I saw more of him. I wanted to see some samples that he was showing on his little device, what he can come up with. But he's like, here, let me show you.
Yep. Spider swatches. You know what I mean?
Yeah, here, let me show you. Look, here. This is the webbing of the fall.
It's one of those rules of storytelling. It's like in a sitcom where it's like, I am not doing that. There's no way I'm doing that. I'm definitely, and then it cuts to like the person doing, you know what I mean?
Just
the fact that Cassian has like said over and over that he like, I'm not going to help them means he's gonna eventually help.
And I think it also helps that he'll have Bix with him now. I think that together he'll be more willing to do that, even though you're again putting her in more danger. But Bix wants to be in the front line, so I think that's going to kind of satisfy both those little story arcs and push it on there. So we're going to leave Ghorman for a bit and talk about kind of the overarching Ghorman and focus on what is Mon Mothma up to. We get to see Mon Mothma doing a lot of politicking. And whereas Luthen seems to be kind of losing control of his rebels at some point, Mon Mothma is losing all of her allies. And we had kind of talked about how what was happening on Ghorman is being allowed to happen. And you kind of see that from the Mon Mothma's perspective as far as she's trying to fight this PORD, that public order resentencing directive that they had kind of brought in the first season of Andor. And that's where like the sentences are being reevaluated. Any minimal crime that is seen as a threat to the Empire is being treated with the harshest. So she talks about how like the crime rate is going up on all these places and how all this is getting out of control, and that the emperor refuses to let go of his superpowers as far as control and that sort of stuff in the government, and all these like sort of facts she's listening on. And little by little you see, and this was another one that I thought about, you, all these alien senators and stuff like that are sneaking in, these little guys, and they have their little robes, and then you have the taller guy, and then you have all this other stuff.
You had that like chaplain guy who looked like something out of Halo, you know?
Yes.
Yeah,
the one who's spouty, and I was kind of disappointed. If that's the guy who you're referring to, who was kind of in position of where the emperor should have been, like the guy who's spouting out his pledge of allegiance or of the empire as to the crowd, and that did totally look like one of those dudes from Halo. And what I thought was even more fascinating about that is that you can just see Mon Mothma just internally like breaking, like her hands clutching, that she has to be here in this room as they're pledging to the empire and all the corruption that's going on. And it's just that whole, in her head, she's just dancing again. Like she just needs to get out of there, and she just bolts as soon as that meeting's out. She bolts out there. But I do find it interesting that you do see that all of her previous allies, all of her political allies, are forming out. And one of the people that Dassi Oran is the actual senator of Ghorman. And when he's talking to her about it, and she's like, you see what's happening there? And he clearly tells her, I don't want to risk like crossing the empire. Anything that we do to the emperor puts us more on our radar. He says, I'm back at home, and I'm telling my people they need to stay calm. They need to like just, work with this, just flow with it, just kind of stay out of trouble, that sort of thing. And you want me to just openly oppose the emperor? That's not happening. And of all the people, you think he would be upset with what's going on. But no, Mon Mothma's got nobody. Mon Mothma has no political allies around. Or does she? We get a cameo, sort of, in one of these galas. So we're going to jump into Vesty Week, because I think that kind of ties in Mon Mothma, and that kind of ties in Luthen and Kleya, and where their own heist of the Shure microphone-sized listening device occurs. So Vesty Week, and we kind of get I'm seeing more development from Purin. Purin, is that his name? Her husband? A little let loosing, right? Like they seem like a little more not so at each other's throats, like a little more team effort that's going on there. So something he comments on is that there were 80 new senators that were elected in this Vesty Week. So the Vesty Week celebrates all the new senators, and they throw parties and yada yada to kind of.
It's like their inauguration. It's their inaugural.
Exactly.
Inaugural.
So what I found extremely fascinating was the fact that it was 80 new senators. So essentially you can see that it's almost as though the emperor is just plucking out the people he doesn't want in there and replacing them all. So even though Perrin is like, most of the time he's kind of like free-willed and whatever, we don't really, not really concerned. Even he's picking up on the thought. He's like, there's never been this many parties like all at once. Like, man, that's a lot of people coming in there. So he kind of does have that suspicion of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things the story arc is showing is how many years BB1? Are we 3 BB1?
We're at 3 right now.
3. All right. So we're 3 years before A New Hope, which means in the beginning of A New Hope, we're told that the Emperor dissolves the Senate. Yep. And so I think what we're seeing is the Galactic Senate has reached a point where it's, as an institution, it's kind of dead. It's obsolete. It's just, and I will try not to steer into actual real world politics here, but like it's showing kind of that institutional death of like, this is no longer an institution that really does anything, right? Mon Mothma, who's a very good politician, can't even get the senator from Ghorman to stand up for Ghorman because he's too afraid. And I think it just shows that, it's no wonder that the emperor is able in just a few short years to take this institution, which I don't know sure how old the Senate is. It's centuries old, I mean, maybe even thousands of years old. And eventually it's been whittled down into this nothing thing where they're just like, it's just throw parties and we take meetings and we don't really do any actual governing anymore. And he's able to just dissolve it, and it's not that big a deal. And the galaxy just kind of goes, oh, okay. And I think we're seeing that. And running into what should be a familiar face, but
a familiar name
face because he's been recast, shows that like we're also headed into something very different very soon.
Yeah, and this was something, and I know they had interviewed Tony Gilroy about this. I still don't know how I feel about this. What is it? Benjamin Bratt?
Benjamin
Bratt?
Bratt, yeah.
Pratt. He's an excellent actor. It's just the physical appearance of it, and this goes into I kind of had the same just kind of internal struggle when they recast Balin's Gull. Like you have no choice. Like especially in that situation where the man is this, you have this legend who's passed away, and you want to continue his story. You want to do his character justice because of everything that he put into the first season. So you've got to recast it. Obviously, they're not going to aim for somebody who just looks exactly like him. You have to have that acting kind of power behind it. And I know Benjamin Bratt, he's an excellent actor, but it's that physical presence that Jimmy Smith just brings to the role that's going to be one of those things that's super hard to just replace. And a lot of people argued about, why would you even do this? It was just like a 5-second throwaway cameo. And Gilroy's response was, because I know that people are just going to bitch about it. So I threw it in there. That way they can get it out of the way on this episode. And then when because he's going to play a much bigger role. We see it in kind of the trailers and that sort of stuff as far as the Senate and where that goes. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of Bail Organa Pratt as far as where his role goes in the rebellion, as far as where his role goes to the falling Senate sort of stuff. So I feel as though, well, no, I don't feel as though. That's exactly what he said. He did that just to kind of get the community's angst out of the way and then just kind of move on with it. How else could you have done this? Jimmy Smits was recording for his other show, his NY New York PD Chicago Blue something 7.
One of those cop.
Yeah, so he couldn't get pulled
Jimmy
away.
Smith's obviously a much he's just a much bigger dude, He just like has more like little beef and muscle, and Benjamin Bratt's a much skinnier and scrawnier dude. So yeah, there's that element. But you're totally right. Like it's more important to just get a good actor in the role who's going to take it seriously than just finding someone who looks like the person. I can get over the fact that he doesn't really look the same. That's easy enough to write off in my head. If the writing is good and the performance is good, I'm not going to think about it too much,
Yeah, and I did like the little toss out about a shout out to his wife, who we came to know and love over in Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then when they had asked him about his daughter, and he's like, "Oh, she's with Luthen. She's coming with Luthen later." Did you get that one? Kleya, she's coming, Brian. She's coming.
I have to say, I thought this was such a stupid theory. I thought this was the dumbest theory. And now there's a small part of me. There's a small part of me that's like, maybe this is like her internship.
And she commands the room. She really does. Like, Kleya commands the room whenever she walks into it, and she doesn't take guff from anyone. So maybe
I'd have to think, because I can't kind of draw. Does she have a British accent? Does Kleya have a British accent?
I feel like they all just have British accents. I think even Cassian Andor, I feel like he just has.
Carrie Fisher obviously doesn't have a British accent, so that would be the one bit of evidence, because their names are very similar and the actresses look alike, and so there's that part of it. But I don't know. I'm still overwhelmingly like, there's no way. I used to be very hostile to this theory before, and now I'm like, okay, maybe it's not totally stupid.
But Bail Organa said she was coming with Luthen later. Deleted scene. I mean, but I think that's the only real solid reason that it can't be true, is because I feel like people would know if Leia Organa was just hanging out at a shop on Coruscant working for Luthen the entire time under a different name. Like, Bail Organa is kind of a big public figure. I'm sure he had these Vesty balls and stuff. We see it in Obi-Wan Kenobi, where they have all these little dining events at his house and that sort of stuff. And Leia's kind of a force to be reckoned with, even as a little child. She's very upfront. People know who she is. Unless he's like, oh yeah, we sent her off to boarding school, so she's learning stuff over there.
Yeah, it'd be like one of the Obama daughters, like my name is like Sasha and Malia Ohana or something like that,
Like, wait, but aren't you? No. So yeah, Kleya does show up with Luthen, and their scheme to take back the large listening device goes through with a little hesitation, but nothing too crazy. Again, Lonnie stacks up. So they do end up there. Luthen's in this party. You see Lonnie, you see Hearts. The only people missing, I think, are Dedra and Partagaz because they're taking care of the Ghorman stuff. We see another great appearance by Krennic. And the more I see him, the more I love him. His his overall and arrogance, and just Krennic is so Krennic. Like every time
he has
I
no
love that
arc or anything this season. He just like pops this,
doesn't.
it's perfect. Like just have him pop in and just like chew the scenery and be like super melodramatic in his cape, you know?
Yeah,
And
I
then
love.
and then
He's
we don't
like,
see him for a couple episodes. He pops. It's perfect. That's all you need. That's all you need.
so yes, my favorite part of the episode was just that smart sparring between Mon Mothma and Krennic, just kind of getting at each other. And once you enter that room and you see them lock eyes, like, oh, shit's about to go down right now. Let's see this, because of all the things. And it's just so funny to think about all the people who are in the room, which is what Lonnie says. You have any idea who's in this room right now? You have Leia Organa pretending to be Kleya. You have Luthen. You have Mon Mothma. You've got Lonnie in there. Was Hertz in there too? Or is it that whoever else? You had the parents. I did find it funny that they kind of kept out the kids. So Skulldon was in there. And then you had both parents, but I guess the kids were on their honeymoon or something. Like they kind of explained it off like, oh yeah, they're out doing something else.
Can I also ask something about Lonnie? Did you pick up on a subtext that Lonnie might either be interested or trying to seduce that other
Hertz?
Imperial? Yeah.
I think it's because Hertz might be gay. So maybe he's using that as his like kind of seduction type technique. I did pick up on that too.
I mean, that's like this is part of him being a spy, or is this like he's actually like Lonnie's gay himself? I don't know, but there definitely felt like a couple moments there were like, oh, nothing in the show is like is there accidentally, right? Like if they're focusing on like there's that line of like, well, why don't you buy me a drink? You know, like
that's in there. Buy me lunch. Done.
Yeah. Oh, there's lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did pick up on that as well. Like, I know that he has a wife and child because that's what he brings up to Luthen last season as far as, okay, like, no, like, I've won out of this. I have a wife, I have a child. Like, I have too much to lose. So it may just be him, like, just kind of be clever and trying to use that to his advantage. Because right now, Hertz, I keep saying Hertz. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's Heertz. So I'm going to keep saying Hertz. Like, I know that the only thing that he had, or at least all we know about him so far, is that he was kind of Dedra's second. So with her out of the picture, he's kind of got to stand up to his own. So it would be just a great move for Lonnie. And this goes back to what I was talking about. Like Lonnie's making moves now. He's not just kind of sitting back and being like a kind of a stooge for Luthen and just feeding him information. He's putting himself in these different places where he could be more productive and could have more of an impact while not just overstepping his boundaries. He only gets really nervous when Kleya just kind of brings him up. She's like, all right, hi, we're flirting. It's no harm. You're coming with me. I need a human shield in order to try to break into this thing and take out a 20-inch sized microphone. Perfect. So like they drag him down in there too. And I was really happy to see that kind of playing between each other where this man is literally sweating bullets. And in my head, I'm wondering, Skulldon have cameras in this precious art gallery type thing, because all you have to do is look at those cameras and see everyone's faces of just that whole interchange of them in the background. And then there were some people who pointed out that at certain points you see Krennic like looking over at Luthen as if he's kind of suspicious of him in certain ways. So just to be a fly on the wall of that room and just kind of pick up on everything that's going off. So yeah, Kleya's able to go and take out that listening device after cutting her hand off and just taking it out. And then her and Luthen walk away smiling triumphantly into the night. And that was kind of a win for them in that sense. Like little do they know what they have to come back to as far as Cinta being gone. But at least they took out Gortz, they took out the listening device. And I did like that Luthen at the end, he kind of jokes about, we should have just killed Krennic while we were in there. But that's what I was thinking. Just kind of wrap it all up in one little thing. And had you done that, there would be no Death Star. He had that chance.
Yeah.
He had that chance.
Yeah. I think this moment was important because I think this is the last mission that's going to go well for a while.
Yeah. Or at least the one with the least consequences. Yeah. Because, and this is a good transition into kind of our closing out, because we are done. We're halfway through Andor. There's 6 episodes left, which is kind of insane to say that. 6 episodes left, only 2 weeks left. They've got a lot to kind of throw in. They've got to throw in K2SO. They've got to kind of push Andor maybe they had to push Andor to that leadership role and get rid of Luthen. I don't see Luthen being kind of in the long-term plans. I don't see how he could be, where we pick up with Andor in Rogue One. Like, that's kind of clearly out of the picture. Andor has to do a little more evolving. We kind of hear from Bix about like how she feels about him killing that one younger Imperial soldier, and he says there's no choice. Then when we open up to Rogue One, the first thing he does is kill his informant. So we have to harden up Andor a lot more, and I think a lot of that's going to come from his losses. I do think we're going to lose Bix. I do think we're going to lose Luthen. I think we're going to lose a lot more people. There's a lot of different promotional images that they're throwing around in Entertainment Weekly and through Disney and the Star Wars site that I'm trying to avoid it all, just because there are things that if you have a keen eye, you can pick up on details and be like, oh, this is going to happen here. This is going to happen here. What are your predictions as far as where we are? I'm going to put up an image on the screen to our kill list. Right now, we started off with our full roster. We have lost, officially, we have lost Tay, we've lost Cinta, and we've lost Brasso. So we've still got Perrin, we've still got the daughter, we've got Skolden, Luthen, Kleya, Vel, Wilmon, B2 Emo. I don't know if we're ever going to see that man again. And then, of course, we have Dedra and Syril. So where do you find us, Brian?
Luthen is not going to make it. There's just no way. You know, maybe I will eat my words, but thematically,
I think he's gone too. Yeah,
exactly. I think Vel's probably not going to make it. Bix is probably not going to make it. It's interesting because this season is not necessarily structured the way I thought it would be structured. I thought it'd be a little more like season one, where like each 3 episodes, and they kind of made it sound like it would be like season one, like each 3 episodes would make a little mini movie. And that is true to an extent, but it's not nearly as true because in season 1, every like 3 episodes, they were like Morlani and the prison break and the uprising on Ferrix. There was more of a self-contained thing. This is really all about and all leading to Ghorman.
Yeah.
Like really, the whole season is really building up to the one massacre, right? Which I assume is going to happen in the next batch. And then the final batch will sort of be the fallout of that, right? Where I'm assuming there's going to be a high body count and lots of bad things are going to go down. And that's going to kick off the rebellion in earnestness. Maybe Luthen dies in Ghorman or not long after. And now Cassian reports to Mon Mothma because Mon Mothma is really leading the rebellion, and how she transitions. Like, can she be the leader that Luthen wanted her to be? Right? Does she have it in her to make the sort of kind of ruthless decisions, or is there a different way? Is there a different kind of leader she can become? And I feel like that's the last part of it. But everything really is revolving around, I think, the next 3 episodes and how the massacre is going to go down.
Yeah, I was also surprised at how long Ghorman was extended out, because I believe I had heard, or we talked about previous interviews with Tony Gilroy, where it's like, oh yeah, there's going to be these 5 main episodes that is going to kind of culminate the whole Ghorman thing. And maybe it's just the 5 episodes of exactly like what happens there, the fallout, and that sort of stuff.
Literally on the planet, because every episode so far has mentioned it.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't expect it to have such a big presence and be the end all be all of what's happening, whether it's the Empire involvement with Krennic and the plot to get rid of like the whatever it is, the ore, the Calcite that they're trying to take out of the thing. And then it's the Syril. It is undercover work there. And then it's, again, even with Cassian, it's like, oh, go sneak out in Ghorman and tell us what's happening. And of course, you have Vel Cinta's whole thing is there. Like, everything is Ghorman related. So it has to all implode next episode, next arc. We are going to get K2SO, I believe, this arc, because I believe that's what they said. It was going to be like midway through, then you get him in. And then just kind of after that, I am really curious as to what other rebels we're going to see, what other kind of groups, because you have to really break out and build up the rebellion as we know it. You know, even things with like Biggs and Wedge, or like that sort of the squadrons that we know now that are a big play, like everything that's in Rogue One kind of has to get set up. Not everything as in, okay, we have to know where Leia is, we have to know where these are, we have to know where Gold Leader is, we're going to know where all these people, like, no, but you have to kind of having to put some structure to this rebellion, because as we had said before, and as we see in Ghorman, like these rebels are broken up. Like, there is no organization, there is no rebel front. So you've got 6 episodes to destroy Ghorman, break up everything we know about the rebellion, and then bring it all back together into what we know becomes the rebellion, and end up back on Yavin and find the corpses of those assholes.
They're still wandering around.
They're still lost in the stomach of that weird creature. So it is gonna be a challenge, and I think they have enough time. Again, I kind of just mentioned that I'd like to see another season of Andor, but it's just because I'm so enthralled with this, just the story and everybody involved in it, and just kind of how it's all building up. And I think they're doing an excellent job. We had talked in the beginning about pacing, and it is just one of those things where how else could you pace something like this? Like, we are going through an entire revolution, fallout, and then the rebuilding of that into a full-on rebellion that leads into a full-on war. So all of that, take a war in history and take everything that happened before and everything that happened after and try to make a movie out of it. And I'm not talking about just like one incident, like a Saving Private Ryan in the middle of it. Like, no, we're talking about building an entire war up and then how that fallout comes to be. So I think that they're doing what they have to do, and those who are sticking with it are going to be rewarded. Like you had said in the very beginning, you guys stick with this. It's going to be great. I know that it's hard. I find us in a particularly excellent situation, and this is me just complimenting us on our own podcast. So great job, Brian. But the fact that we decided to jump into Star Wars podcasting at one of the best and worst times ever, because there's so much going on right now as far as with Star Wars Celebration, new projects going on, this big show of Andor to kind of cover all at once. And we don't have a lot of privy that a lot of other YouTubers or podcasters have, in that I know Disney sent out the full-on Andor season 2 to a lot of people, and they watched it all and they were able to consume it as one, and they are able to review these episodes knowing where it's going to. And I think we're in a good position because we don't know where it's going. So we're there with the audience, and whether or not this show fails or succeeds to us is really how it'll fail or succeed to a bigger portion of the general public. So we just kind of have that like on board. I think even if we were in the position where we got it all, I don't know if I'd want to watch it all. Like, would you want to watch it all like at once? I don't know if I'd be able to resist, but I don't know if we'd be able to cover this genuinely knowing everything.
No, this is a very dense show. I like that it's a weird release schedule, but I think it works.
Yeah. And that closes out our coverage of Andor Season 2, Arc 2, episodes, what are we, 4 through 6 now. We're coming right back to cover episodes 7 through 9, Arc 3. We've already kind of given you our thoughts as far as what we want to happen. We want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think is going to happen within the next arc? When is Kleya going to put up her buns and become Leia Organa? Where is B2EMO going to come back and give him the plans to the Death Star, retconning Rogue One? There's so many things that could happen, and we're having a great time just covering it all with you guys. Brian, any last words for our viewers?
I just want to say in Ghorman, au revoir.
That's right. That's right.
It's a totally made up ancient alien language. It's not any resemblance to any other language, purely coincidental.
Viva la Ghorman Revolution.
Viva la Ghorman Revolution.
So thank you again, guys. Like and subscribe and do all that great stuff. We're going to be kicking out these episodes as much as we want, and we'll be happy to have you guys along for the ride. So thank you again, and see you next time.